You ever thought of a joke that might have been funny if you thought of it a year ago, then you sat on it for 2 years? That's great, actually. I have a good story for you to sympathize with. Follow along if you know the words, but if you haven't seen it, this is just a brief clip from the end of my last video. My next video will probably be an analysis of Squid Game, since I have yet to see anyone compare it to the 90s Disney film that it was an obvious tribute to. Even if it's many months from now. At the time I recorded that, Squid Game had already been analyzed into an early grave. Some people said it's a critique on capitalism, others said it's a critique on communism, so I figured it'd be wise of me to throw my hat in the ring and give a fresh take, in the fall of 2022. But when I sat down to actually write down my thoughts on Squid Game, I felt a shiver. A spectral voice of some kind yelled out to me and said, I mean, I was a fan of Squid Game, at least at the time, but something changed. After mulling it over for a long while, it hit me. It is obvious that Squid Game's the spiritual successor to the Goofy movie. So what else do I say? Fast forward to the spring of 2024 and I'm sitting at my desk, mug shopping on Amazon. Nothing special, just a couple spare Funke's. I had put one too many in the cart, and when I noticed, I went over to customer service to get the order fixed. Now I'm explaining my conundrum to the customer service rep and how everybody already seems to know about the Goof Game connection, and that's when he tells me something. Bro, have you peeped Amazon's new hit series, The Boys? It's like a Goofy movie, but grounded in reality. Unfortunately, it looks like I'm still the owner of an extra copy of my favorite mug, but I ended up purchasing the 3 seasons of The Boys at no additional savings for Prime members, but hey, in for a penny, in for a pound, right? Now that I've come out on the other side, I've got to say, I want what he's smoking.
They've been laughing since I can remember, but they're not gonna laugh anymore. No more Max even Geek, no more Goof of the Week like before.
Alright, so I'm gonna spread this thing out like a numbered pizza. Imagine, if you will, a slice of pizza with the size, shape, and texture of an iceberg. As we make our way up to the slice's crust, we'll start at... First I was like, what? How could Amazon do this without Disney's permission? Well, the answer's quite simple, actually. Parody law. If you had asked Weird Al Yankovic to become a director, start working in Amazon, and then told him to make the Delta farce of the Goofy universe, the result would basically be The Boys. But that begs the question, why was I being told by Amazon Studios that their hit series The Boys is just a retelling of a decades-old story? Well, that answer is quite simple as well. Not only do they sell the original film on their website, but they actually carry the elusive unrated version. Be sure to pick up a copy on VHS. Next I was like, wait, when? Where did this come from? I still don't know the answer, but I'm hoping to find it by the end of the video. By the time I had finished the last episode of Season 3, there was a look of shock that stayed on my face for several weeks. I couldn't believe it. The wit, the laughs, the wholesome life lessons, all of them perfectly preserved. In the process of expanding on such a beloved set of characters, Amazon proved to me that the Goof Troop can't be stopped by the sands of time. Now, most of you should agree that eating a slice of pizza is an activity with multiple steps. The first 2 bites are the informal introduction, where the pizza justifies its existence, but the real meat and potatoes is in that 3rd bite. And that begs the question, what now? Well, if you watch my videos dissecting the alt-left ideology of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure's most iconic villain, you may recall that I split it into 2 videos. First, I covered the plot's themes, then I broke down the cast of characters and their real-life analogs. This time, however, I'll do the opposite. So if you have not seen The Boys, I do recommend it, just be wary of the cost per entry. Also, if you're like me and you're waiting for your VHS copy of the Goofy movie unrated to make its way through the mail, I would recommend the Wikipedia article if you're trying to familiarize yourself with the Goofniverse. And finally, if you have not seen Squid Game and it happens to come up at some point in the video, then this will play. I would take that as your cue to go watch Squid Game before you continue. Enough preamble. Let's get into it, shall we? So that begs the question, who do I start with? I could pick a random character from either property, maybe with a spinning wheel, but that does feel a little pastiche. So what I will do is something I like to call the chronological comparison. I'll begin with a Goofy movie. We open in a dream sequence, with fields of wheat that should seem familiar. Before we know it, a funny character pops his head into frame. This character is Max Goof. Remember this. Max enters a crop circle to find a pillar with a woman atop. The pillar woman descends, and as the two lay on the ground in each other's presence, the woman yells out. Max has become old and mangled, and as he gasps for air, he rises from sleep. Moments later, the old and mangled monster that Max morphed into during his nightmare enters the room. Who do these two characters remind you of? Well, this may come as no surprise, but the mangled nightmare was the inspiration for Amazon's Ryan, and the character Max is our Homelander. As Max exits the home, he's shown affection from his father that's not reciprocated, similar to how Homelander is with people. During his opening monologue, Homelander lusts after a woman named Roxanne. She'll be important a bit later. Once he arrives at his school, Max is shown to have other people who he spends time with. The characters we see here are named PJ and Bobby. Now PJ, that's the guy in the blue shirt, he's obvious. It's the movie's A-Train, but the man with the canned cheese is a bit more interesting. The Deep is a character often played for laughs, but he has a dark side, much like who we see before us. Now in the show, these two characters enter the ranks of a cult-like religious group known as the Church of the Collective, looking for another shot at the Seven, to stand out, as it were. But in the source material, the Deep and A-Train are risking their own careers just so Homelander can woo a fascist. Why would they do this for Max?
I am the Homelander.
Maybe they're risking their careers by aligning themselves with a Vought-backed cult? I mean, Homelander is the mascot of Vought's most popular superhero group, so in a sense they are standing out in their own way. But is the cheese Fresca? There's still time to find these answers, so I'll put this to the side for now. Flipping over to the B plot, Ryan is currently working his menial job when he's suddenly approached by a large, intimidating presence. But before I continue, I need to give a spoiler warning for the Kingdom Hearts series. If you have not played them already, please pause the video and play the following 2 entries. If you're able to find a YouTube playlist that compiles the cutscenes for each game, I think that will suffice. Trust me, I can wait. Okay, so there's a character in the game who is the glue holding this whole thing together. His name is Pete. I'll come back to why he's important a bit later. So this man, named Pete, warns Goofy about Homelander, and as Ryan struggles to process the personification of Becca's memory, Pete is able to take over and process the grief in a forcefully controlled manner. Imagine you're a writer working at Amazon. You're asked to adapt this scene. How would you do it? If we were to replay this scene while wearing those shoes, we'd find Butcher waking up to see Goofy in an emotionally fraught state. He'd look around and find that the pesky child has been the source of his struggling, and Pete is able to react to the situation in a calculated manner.
Somebody help us!
Flipping back to the A plot, Max's musical outing was pretty successful, prompting his love interest to accept his courtship. But who is this woman? Well, if you watch The Boys, as I have, then it will come as no surprise that she's Stormfront. Keep this in mind, as that character's past will rear its ugly head soon. Stormfront's approached by another woman who's wearing a pair of glasses. I'm not really sure who she's supposed to be, so I'm going to put a bookmark in this. Alright, so after speaking with Max, Mallory calls Ryan and tells him that Homelander is sliding down a slope which slips, slides, and twists towards extremism. Ryan's confused by this information, as he had good experiences with Max, causing him to enter a state of emotional turmoil. The difference lies in the way Max's misdeeds are conveyed in the reboot. He enters the scene caked in the viscera of expulsion. Seeing this Max, this evil, death sentence-bound interpretation of him, pushes Pete to level with Goofy, priming him to the validity of what the principal is saying about Homelander. Butcher and Grace are the two heels to Max, but unlike the film, we don't see Ryan react to the information by embarking on a cross-country journey to fish with his son. Or do we? When you're watching a film, say Pulp Fiction, do you watch it thinking it's all in order? Well, what if I told you that there are movies out there that don't share the same love that we do for the concept of linear storytelling?
And you know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
Hamburger.
Here's a sneak preview. And what if I told you that Becca, rather, the Disney character that inspired her, appears later in the film than the character meant to represent the impact of her death? That's the problem with this method of character comparison. Sometimes the order I present them is hampered by the non-linear way in which The Boys reworks the plotlines of a Goofy movie. I do believe, in spite of this, doing chronological comparing with The Boys is much easier than with a Goofy movie. Remember this for when I'm discussing Beavers. Sorry, I kinda gave the game away with what takes place next. So, Homelander is upset that he has to fish with his son, as he had just announced his new relationship with Stormfront, but begrudgingly enters the world of Goofy. They set off. But to what place? Well, we saw a handy United States map, so let's take a look, shall we? First off, look at the names there. These names imply that, at one time, only a single patriarch was able to handle the map. It seems that this hierarchy changed, perhaps through a revolt of some kind, where now the ownership of the map is held by a trust that was set up by the family. The Boys, as an entity within the titular The Boys, drives down a similar highway. They begin their existence as a rogue group within the federal government, but as tensions between superheroes and the masses grow, their status is elevated and they're even receiving federal funding from congressional committees. But what information can we glean from the map itself? We see that the two are located currently in an area between Columbus and Cleveland, Ohio. Their plan is to travel west and follow the same steps as Lewis and Clark. Homelander is known to have a fondness for westward expansion and, quote, the woods, which begs the question, why is he now vehemently opposed to the idea of reliving an iconic adventure? I guess you could argue that Max's feelings in this scene is a bit more of a hat tip to the way that Amazon is currently reliving Disney's. From Ohio, they go to the G23 Expo on the Michigan border, over to Wisconsin, down to Arkansas, through the Southwest, and over to the Utah-Nevada border. Here is where we get a bit of an impasse. One path leads to the Pacific Northwest, prior home of Stormfront in the series, and the other leads to Southern California. Now I know what you're thinking, what about the Northeast? Well, that is where Vought Tower resides, so Ryan not wanting to go there makes sense. What I was thinking, though, is what the meaning was for the saucepan reminder. I'll keep this in mind for a bit later. I have a feeling it's going to be important. The two depart for the G23 summit, arguing along the way by way of music. I have yet to see a scene in the show where characters break out into song, so for the sake of brevity, I'll move along to their arrival. Homelander is unimpressed by the expo, similar to how he reacts to Ryan's Lego videos, but he obliges his father and enters. The next character we see may not look familiar, and I don't blame you for not recognizing him without the mask, but he's actually Black Noir. These may not be beavers, but they are still imaginary mammals. Over the course of the show, Max is becoming more and more angry. Let me pause for a moment. I forgot to mention, but remember this? I told you I'd bring this up when I mentioned beavers. It's a pulp-type story after all, so not everything is going to make sense right now.
Hamburger.
What will is who we see here. Homelander is very uncomfortable around her, because she is Starlight. Oh, speaking of, there's one more thing I forgot to bring up, so let me just rewind here. Okay, so as they're leaving their neighborhood, Homelander prompts Goofy to halt their travel. He throws his father to the side like trash, and walks up and onto a porch. Max knocks, expecting Stormfront, but is met by this character. Seem familiar? Well, if his stature wasn't an immediate tell, how about now? With all this in mind, is it any wonder why Homelander is experiencing these emotions here? This day ends, and a new one begins. They're now where Max is supposed to be at his happiest. The woods. Suddenly, Ryan is nearly murdered by the towering weight of Homelander's nationalism. Within this manifestation are two familiar faces, A-Train and Butcher. The introduction of Butcher, from Ryan's point of view, is not all that dissimilar to Butcher's point of view when looking at Ryan post the mortal wound of Becca. Pete and A-Train are characters that on paper don't have a common moral compass. This may explain why Max immediately globs onto PJ and Goofy onto Butcher. In this bottle episode of a scene, we're told more about the characters and their relationships to one another than Amazon was able to tell in 30 times the time. Like here, cute little scene of Butcher and Ryan bowling together. In the series, this scene was retooled and given to Huey and Starlight, but in the movie, this happens. Look at the speed of that man.
I can't stop.
Ryan and Max watch some more Lego videos, this time it's a bit more on the nose, and that's when we see a new face. Lured by the prospect of an easy meal, this character sets chase on the father-son duo and forces them into a cramped vehicle. Not before Ryan gets some more footy for his next stop-motion project, though. Trapped, they can only watch as this new character destroys any chance they had of living outside this bubble. Now, I could keep burying the lead or just come out and say it. It's clearly supposed to be the living Becca. She, in this moment, is telling Max that a film rated PG is too mature for him to process healthily. Now, before you comment, oh, why the heck is Becca a mythical creature of the American jungle? It wasn't my decision to make the boys, okay? I'm doing my best here. Homelander and Ryan share a meal named after a father. Kinda like when they ate at that restaurant that had fatherly-themed menu items. Becca grows bored and leaves, granting Max and Goofy their freedom. But wait, I saw that. What was that? Let's back up a second. Here. Homelander has the map and alters it to not contain an impasse. He's controlling the destiny of Goofy in a way that he thinks is best for him, and in this case, best means more efficient. There's a bit of body horror as Ryan wakes up, which would blow Max's cover, and as he hides his true intentions, we find out Goofy was none the wiser. So why was Homelander so worried about making both of their lives simpler? I would keep this in mind. There's a bit of stale bread coming up. They get food poisoning, and then there's some frames that look like threats of physical violence. I was lost here. I'll assume that this was just some stuff on the chopping room floor at Amazon Prime, but if it ends up making sense, I'll circle back to it. The pair arrive at a hotel, one with a theme that's so obvious I won't even talk about it. I try to avoid low-hanging fruit, especially when it hangs so low. Well, their party is crashed by Butcher, so Ryan leaves with him while PJ spends time with Homelander. They eat pizza together, which reminds me, remember what I said at the start about the dance between a melt and a slice? We'll take a look at the one A-Train's holding. See what he does there? Let's get a replay on that. That was, at the very least, his first bite, if not the first two, but what did he do with it? He drags the cheese across the slice, vertically, mixing the introduction with the meat. We move over to see Butcher and Ryan sitting in a hot tub. Little does Ryan know, but Butcher is all too aware of what Max had done to the map. He tells Goofy, "Don't you trust that there Homelander." But Goofy can't believe it. In his mind, his own blood relative is now the same mangled horror that Homelander TF'd into at the beginning. However, unlike Max, Goofy processes these feelings by way of disdain or disgust as opposed to abject horror. The nuanced approaches we have to info hazards makes us human, and Goofy is the ideal. We want to be able to recognize the people around us who have our worst in mind. I once found myself in a similar situation. Someone close to me once altered my map, added a stop to the route. Did I reject the change at first? I mean, of course, why wouldn't I? I wasn't the one who needed a restroom. But did I sever my relationship with this person? It came close, but no, I didn't. We talked it out, explained our sides, and came to a resolution, like any healthy couple should. It's this type of communication that Ryan needed from Homelander in this moment. In a perfect world, they would have had a talk about the changes and continued their adventure. Not every situation can be resolved like this, regardless of how many empty bottles you keep in your car. Sometimes, the people we love just gotta go. At this point, it seems as though their journey was a complete fail. Homelander and Ryan are at odds. Ryan knows Homelander is evil. Homelander knows Ryan is weak and malleable, so the two may never bond. The next part didn't really make sense. Homelander's careening off a waterfall, and Ryan risks his own life to save him. I thought this was another piece of scrap trash from the Amazon floor, until I had a little nap. And while I slept, a vision came to me in a dream. It was Stormfront, just not how I remembered her. She was in Vought Tower. Homelander was there too. He tried to kill her, but it didn't work. He found himself facing a woman-shaped waterfall 10,000 feet tall. Ryan steps in. He yells, "That's my dead bitch!" and blasted her to bits, saving Max. So why am I telling you about my dream? Because now, it all makes sense. Homelander makes a Lego video of his own, ushering in a new age of family bonding. All of which leads us here, the climax of the film. The crescendo of Amazon's work, if you will. There's a little bit of song and dance, we see the better part of all 7 of the 7 in one scene, and then they go home. Homelander talks to Stormfront one more time, of course with old Huey there to rough him up a little, and Ryan almost dies as he tries to plant himself into this family unit. So that's the movie, or should I say, boy prequel. It was informative, textured, raw, witty, really anything else you would call The Boys. One thing I can call a goofy movie, that I wouldn't call The Boys, is finished. I watched everything I could buy and still couldn't shake the feeling I was missing something.
If we listen to each other's heart, we're never too far apart.
Have you ever thought of a joke that might have been topical a year ago, made a video about it, and then realized it's no longer relevant? Well, unbeknownst to me, mere months before I started work on this video, Amazon decided to release the season finale of Season 4 of The Boys. Unlike parts 1 through 3, I can't buy it on YouTube, and when I try to buy it on Amazon, I get redirected to Prime Video. At this point, I'm at least, $100 in the hole?
Get in the hole, Murph.
I mean, I could ask one of my family members to lend me their login. Do I want to become another Jonathan Joestar, though? Like, what was the point of bashing beneficiaries of nepotism if I'm not any different? I took a deep breath, set up my Prime Video account with ads. Now bear with me while I get caught up. Wow. The next tier of the slice was going to be me going through The Boys, rather, what I thought was The Boys, using the chronological comparison. I'll hold off on that for now. We have some time to rewind. First off, and you may have prematurely commented this, but yes, I know that Soldier Boy is Powerline. That should be the only person pre-Part 4 that passed me by. That woman with Roxanne, she has to be Sister Sage, right? She even gets with the Deep at the end, so that's a lock. Roxanne does look a bit more like Firecracker than Stormfront, based solely on hair color, but Firecracker isn't nearly as ideologically in sync to Roxanne as Stormfront is, so for now I'll assume that I was right the first time. Who else? Oh, wait, let's go back a little. Let me find it here. Okay, I knew there was a reason I was so unsure about this part. Deep and A-Train aren't joining the Church of the Collective during the standout performance. They're murdering Homelander supporters in a false flag attack attributed to Starlight. Man, this thing is so out of order. Makes a lot more sense, though, doesn't it? Let me get my bearings here. The Pete stuff still tracks. Noir wasn't really killed off in the movie, so that's probably a new addition. Here we go, I got something. We see the interior of Butcher's RV, but it looks almost too clean. Almost like Pete just finished cleaning up a crime scene. Was Ezekiel in the RV before they got to the woods? They aren't related in the show, but Butcher and A-Train are technically on the same team. Did PJ help Butcher? I look how open-ended some of this stuff is. And for the record, yes, I know that Part 5 isn't out yet. Perhaps I'm tackling this too early, but I'd like to avoid a second Squid Game. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that Goofy was Ganbu in my Squid Game comparison. Moving on, Becca's fine, this makes sense. One sec, I just thought of something. The part where they argue through music kind of reminds me of Vought on Ice. Amazon definitely added the scene of Max hunting Roxanne's dad, though, unless there's something I'm missing. Also, we never see them together in the source, but it's a neat bit of world building to have PJ save Roxanne's dad from Max. Maybe he's not as trustworthy as Max seems to believe. Do you think that Homelander pursues Roxanne because Powerline, his idol, sings about choosing someone who's less conventionally attractive than you? Even if I didn't pick up on this before when watching The Boys, it's painfully obvious now. Some nights I lie in bed wondering if the writers over at Prime Video had insider access to the screenwriters. If I could rewind time, I would have inserted myself into a Goofy movie's development, just so I could see these discussions play out for myself, even if I was just a fly on the wall. How would my life look if I did? No different, I imagine. I'd be like Homelander and Ryan, stuck, with nowhere to run except into the arms of a killer. The next part I had called stale bread before, and I'm not saying it's not that, it just strikes me as the boys' way of showing us Ryan attempting to emulate his father. Goofy eats food, which is the responsibility of being a soup, but then gets food poisoning, which is the consequence of this pursuit. The whole thing with Ryan and Butcher in the hot tub was obvious to me before. It's identical to the countless times Pete cries about Homelander in the show. However, the hot tub itself could be a metaphor for Butcher's house. I already brought Soldier Boy up, so I don't think there's anything else I can say as we circle back to the end of the movie. So what do you think? That was pretty easy, right? Now let's get to the hard part. Now that begs the question, didn't we just go through Part 4? I should clarify, that was an aside within Part 3 about Part 4 of The Boys, so it wasn't exactly a new section. If it helps, here's a more accurate chart. This is the real Part 4 of my video, but before I start, let me ask you something. If you had to pick any character from a Goofy movie to act as the protagonist in your soft reboot, who would you pick? If you answered correctly, good job. Then you can probably guess that the first moments in the show surround the widowing of Roxanne's father. Before I can continue, I need to confess something. I was totally unaware that an extremely Goofy movie existed. Ever since I looked it up, I've been flooded with ads for the second season of Squid Game that apparently came out a few weeks ago. So I'm going to take a breather and absorb this content to see how it plays into what we've discussed so far. Even if it's many years from now, I hope to see you there. Goodbye.